DreamWorks Pictures presents a world that's never been seen.
Look at that stallion, it's beautiful.
And a freedom that can never be taken.
Look out!
This summer, a new spirit is born. On Memorial Day, discover a new kind of motion picture experience for everyone.
Set me free.
You will always be in my heart, spirit who could not be broken.
The hero's journey, a classic storytelling trope, where the hero goes on a journey and returns, changed for the better or for worse, depending on the medium. It's basically a basic cookie-cutter storytelling method that could be copy and paste on just about any medium that basically exists. That has a hero withstanding all kinds of trials on their journey. I think the best examples for this trope is movies. The hero goes on a quest, they meet people that will help them on their journey, there's trials that they need to face, there's conflict, there's redemption, and the final trial, and they return home a changed person. However, there is one movie that I always return to, time and time again. Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. This movie is my favorite example of this trope. Even though the main character doesn't speak, it does follow the same rules. Even if it isn't the exact same rules as the hero's journey, but it is still a hero's journey. My name's Patrick Reyes, and in this video, we're exploring my favorite interpretation of the hero's journey. So before I begin, I guess I should start summarizing the plot. Spirit is a DreamWorks animated movie from 2002 about a Mustang horse living during the westward expansion, probably during the 1850s or 1860s from the look of the setting. He gets captured by humans and goes on an emotional journey, an odyssey to return to his herd, facing trials and dangers that test his full power and determination, all in an effort to never be tamed. Now, with all that summarizing out of the way, let's talk about the protagonist and the other characters. First, we have Spirit, our protagonist. He's strong-headed, overconfident, stubborn, and he's an overprotective stallion. Throughout this movie, he's going to make mistakes. Mistakes that cost him his safety and his well-being due to his overconfidence, that he doesn't pick up on the fact that he's being a bit too impulsive. However, by the end of the film, he's no longer stubborn or impulsive, and the emotional journey he takes returning home has actually changed him for the better. Spirit is an unconventional protagonist. He's a horse. He doesn't talk, and we're basically seeing the world and seeing through his eyes. The mentor character. Normally in these types of stories, the hero meets someone who trains them or offers them guidance. Spirit, on the other hand, has 3 mentor characters that represent an emotional lesson that Spirit needs to learn. The first mentor we actually see in the movie is the eagle. And although the eagle is claimed to be Spirit's friend, I believe that the eagle is actually meant to represent a sort of spirit guide for Spirit. He's the ever-present character that we see throughout the film. The eagle itself is meant to represent hope. A hope for him to actually cling on to as he tries to make his way back to his herd. He's an ever-present being that's actually guiding our protagonist to his goal. The second mentor that we see is actually Little Creek. He's the Lakota native who's actually been captured by the film's villain. And he teaches Spirit about trust, and of course about freedom. And last but not least, we have Rain, a pinto mare and Little Creek's horse. She teaches Spirit about patience, compassion, and she even teaches him how to view the world from a different view. Rather than its brutality, she teaches him how to see the world for its beauty. All 3 characters actually shape Spirit's viewpoint on the world and help him find solace as he journeys back to his herd. Now, although Spirit has mentor characters that can help him out on his journey, we do need to talk about his trials and tribulations. Alright, let's talk about the Colonel. The Colonel is the antithesis of our hero. He's cunning, calculating, egotistical, cruel, and hateful. Spirit is overconfident and stubborn because he's a young stallion, whereas the Colonel is egotistical by choice, not because of biological behavior like Spirit. He views Spirit not as an individual, but as a tool for which he could break and be useful for him. He views horses as tools, not companions, which also makes him the antithesis of Little Creek, who views Spirit as his own person. The Colonel is not a mentor, he's an obstacle. Spirit needs to confront later on in the story. Whereas Little Creek teaches Spirit how to trust and find freedom, the Colonel perpetuates mistrust and the need for control. Rain teaches Spirit about compassion and patience, whereas the Colonel is full of hate and has no patience for anyone he harms. Whereas the eagle represents hope, the Colonel represents despair. The Colonel is the opposite of every lesson that Spirit learns along his journey. He's the main obstacle that our hero must overcome before his journey comes to an end. Now, with that out of the way, I guess we could start off discussing the different stages of the hero's journey. The first stage of the journey is called the Ordinary World, or as I like to refer to it as the Origin Phase. This stage gets us the world building of the story setting and how the world works. Although the timeline of the movie is somewhat known, the location, however, is a fucking mess. Now, I don't want to get into the giant geographical mess of this movie. Maybe in another video, maybe I could talk about where the fuck every location in this movie is. But anyways, the movie starts off with this beautiful shot of what I think is Montana, maybe, and its valley views. Again, despite how beautiful it is still a geographical mess. So, with that rant out of the way, we see Spirit be born as a foal and we see his childhood, all the way up till he's a full-grown stallion, and he becomes the leader of his herd. He's very protective of them. I know this movie is partially a musical, but the way it pretty much portrays Spirit's life at the beginning is pretty beautiful and kinda humorous in a way. Now, although the origin part of this movie is quite brief, we do get to know Spirit a bit more before he embarks on its journey, which brings me to the next stage of its journey: the call of adventure and the refusal. Now, for this stage, both stages of the call and refusal of adventure occur in the exact same scene, as Spirit basically sees a cloud of smoke out in the distance and he wishes to investigate it. But his mother warns him not to, thus invoking the refusal of adventure. However, rejecting the advice of his mother, Spirit instead accepts the call and travels to the smoke trail as well. There, he discovers humans for the first time, which becomes Spirit's first threshold, which happens again in the same stage of both the refusal and call. So we're now moving forward, I guess. And due to his overconfidence, he gets captured, thus beginning his hero's journey. We now begin with Spirit's next stage of its journey. The first threshold, which occurred just previously, as he's now traveling from one valley to another. As Spirit's situation becomes dire, being in an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar creatures he's never seen. Spirit has no choice but to despise them. As they arrive to the fort is incredibly noisy and chaotic, and the setting feels incredibly hostile, and it doesn't help that humans are more dangerous than any other creature. The other horses are no help because they fear the humans, and there's no animal more cruel and dangerous than the Colonel, the main obstacle of the story, and the one individual Spirit truly despises. Which brings me to his next stage, the first trial. Although this is everyone's favorite scene, including mine, this is Spirit's first trial, being tamed. After the humans nearly removed what was left of his former self, their next decision is to try to break him. So every soldier gathers around the corral and tries their hands on trying to break him. Which each fail. In the end, Spirit succeeds in his first trial. The second trial, however, is a bit more challenging. The post. Tied to a stake in the middle of the corral, the colonel forces Spirit to be tied there for 3 days, with no food or water. This, of course, starts to take a toll on Spirit's mental health, and the eagle that has been guiding him since the start of the journey isn't really there, but his hope to escape back to his herd is still there. It's here where he also meets his second mentor, Little Creek. Little Creek was captured by the colonel and placed in another corral with the same punishment. Spirit doesn't trust Little Creek just yet. Considering his experience with the worst that humanity had to offer, to him Little Creek is just another creature like the colonel, and believes that all humans are basically the same, cruel, callous creatures with no compassion. Although Little Creek tries to get Spirit to trust him, the third trial has just begun. Spirit failed the second trial, and as he's already exerted all of his energy, thus making the third trial all the more difficult. The third trial is, of course, being broken again. Try as he might, Spirit nearly breaks. But once again, his determination and hope to escape helps him in the end. He frees not only himself, but the other horses as well. Also, Little Creek frees himself with the help of some friends that were outside the fort. Spirit succeeds in his third trial as he is finally free from the colonel, as he tries to make his way back to the herd.
More ropes.
His journey isn't over yet. He still has more to learn before he could basically return. The next stage of the story is what I like to call the calm. Why? Because it's basically the calm before the storm. It's where the story relaxes for a moment before the danger actually arrives again. This is where we meet our final mentor, Rain. Rain is a calm and relaxed pinto mare who also happens to be Little Creek's horse. She teaches Spirits about compassion and patience. Both Little Creek teaches him about trust, or at least tries to. Rain teaches Spirit to see the world from a different lens. Rather than seeing the world as a hostile and terrible place, she wants him to see the world for its beauty and not its dangers. This seems to work a little too well for Spirit, as he ends up falling in love with Rain. This leads, of course, to our next stage, temptation. Although Spirit wishes to return to his herd, he's fallen in love with Rain, and now believes that his destiny is with her. He's almost forgotten his mission, But the eagle returns to remind him, making him upset that he would never return. Little Creek finally completes its lesson, and Spirit is able to trust him. But something upsets Little Creek. He recognizes that Spirit will never be tamed, and rather than try to break him, he lets him go, thus finally ending the calm before the storm. We've arrived to the second threshold. And although Spirit does feel free and tells Rain to come with him, something doesn't feel right. So, Spirit sees smoke, just like before, but this time, something isn't right. He and Rain go to investigate, and as he races back to the village, he finds the Colonel and his men, killing and pillaging everyone on sight. Spirit rushes to try to save everyone, only to find Little Creek getting ready to defend his people. But that's when the Colonel tries to kill him. Spirit rushes as he tries to save him, but the Colonel manages to shoot Rain, striking her and plunging them into the fast-moving river. Spirit jumps in to try to save them. This is it. Spirit's fourth trial. Trapped on the river's current, Spirit tries his best to save both Rain and Little Creek. Although he manages to save Little Creek, he barely manages to reach Rain. But they both plunge down into the water below. Spirit manages to survive the fall, but Rain is clinging to life. The bullet wound is not only making it worse, but her adrenaline is running out. Though she managed to survive on pure instinct and adrenaline, it's not enough. And Spirit has failed this trial, or at least he believes that that is true. The third threshold. Typically in movies where you reach the halfway point of your journey, your protagonist reaches what is likely their lowest point. I like to call this stage the conflict stage, because the protagonist reaches a point of despair or conflict with their traveling companion that hope no longer feels viable. Spirit believes that Rain is dead, and he didn't save Little Creek. And the train sequence in the movie feels the same way. Spirit feels like he's lost all hope, and that resistance is useless. He believes that he failed in his quest to return home, that he failed to save everyone, and that the villagers are all dead because of him, and he's lost, and that the Colonel got what he wanted: complete control. And this is probably the saddest moment of the movie, which is why I call it the third threshold. Just when things are looking dire, at least in these types of stories, typically there's one more trial to test our protagonist, to see what he's learned and to test his willpower. The railroad scene is such an example. Believing that he's lost all hope, Spirit realizes that the train is heading north. This gives him enough hope and determination to destroy the train tracks heading to his home place. In a matter of minutes, Spirit was able to destroy what may have been the Transcontinental Railroad, or at least that's what it looks like. Again, the timeline seems to point to 1850s, 1860s, but location-wise, it's a fucking mess. Also, he does this while still being tied to his chains. Of course, that chain nearly kills him, but fortunately, he is saved by Little Creek, who was surprisingly alive. Which means if Little Creek is alive, then so is Rain. As it turns out, Little Creek has been tracking Spirit down in order to save him, and thus Spirit finally succeeds in its final trial. Alright, this is the final threshold, also known as the climax, or the final confrontation, whatever you want to call it. This is where our protagonist finally confronts the main villain of the story, or in this case, the main obstacle. After Little Creek saves Spirit from the explosion, we get one final shot of calmness, and then the Colonel arrives. This is what can arguably be one of the best chase sequences in animated history. I like this chase, mostly because it feels like a callback to the first chase scene of the movie, rather than Spirit being too overconfident. Now Spirit is being a bit smarter with his escapes, avoiding even close encounters with his captors, and using the terrain to his advantage. Spirit is able to avoid capture this time. Then, we get what is arguably the most memorable scene of the movie. The long jump. Honestly, this is the most beautiful scene of the film. The music, the scenery, the cinematic moments. This is something else. God, this is the most beautiful shot I've seen. Spirit finally defeats the Colonel. Not through battle, not through brute strength, but through sheer willpower and wits. Not every battle should be won through brute strength. Some battles can be won with determination, and it even after defeating the main villain, the quest still isn't over. Our protagonist still has one last thing they need to do before returning home. Sometimes it's a reward for their valiant deeds, or sometimes it's one of their companions who wishes to go with the protagonist. With Spirit, it's the latter. It turns out everyone from the village is still alive, including Rain, which means she survived her injuries. Little Creek realizes that Spirit doesn't belong with him and lets him go once again, but also makes a tough decision. He lets go of Brain, the one companion who's always been there, probably forever, and he lets her go, finally realizing that he too went on an emotional journey. As the two ride away into the sunset, they make it all the way back to Spirit's home. Spirit returns home changed for the better. And that is my analysis of Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. I've been wanting to do this video for quite some time, and I'm glad I did. It's one of my favorite animated movies growing up. In fact, this movie actually inspired me to actually get into drawing. So you're probably wondering where I've been this whole time. I know I haven't been posting since last October, but the truth is I've basically been mentally exhausted for a while, but I'm trying to get back into this. So maybe in the next video I could probably take it a bit slow rather than try to rush too many ideas and try to do them at once. But with that, I hope you guys actually enjoyed this video. I know I did. It took me a while to actually record and edit this stuff, mostly because I've been exhausted and burnt out. But hopefully you guys actually enjoyed this. Until next time, bye.